Let's talk Tennessee recruiting. And in this video, we're going to talk Tennessee versus Georgia. There seems to be a bunch of these matchups happening on the recruiting trail. So we are going to break down some of these head-to-head battles. I got Matt Ray from VolQuest on this video. But first, Tennessee fans, do me a favor and hit subscribe to the On3 Recruit channel, the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. All right, let's bring in Matt Ray. Matt, let's go to Atlanta and talk about wide receiver Travis Smith, because he's set to announce his decision on July 13th. So little less than a week away for him. And, you know, we said there's a lot of Georgia battles, Georgia leading on the RPM right now. But what does it mean for the number 11 wide receiver who's about to decide?
Yeah, Josh, I think for really the longest time in this recruitment with Travis Smith, since we've been talking about him all the way back into October, which coincidentally enough was right before he came to Tennessee for the Tennessee and Georgia game on November 18th there. This has been a Tennessee-Georgia battle kind of throughout this recruitment. Now, Auburn and Alabama both worked to shake things up, but ultimately that's kind of where things have been, and each of those teams have had momentum at different points in this recruitment. Coming out of the month of June, as the calendar flipped over to July here, continue to hear a lot of positive things around Tennessee and Travis Smith. Georgia very much still in the thick of it. And a big part of this decision for Travis Smith has been, can he leave the state of Georgia? He's been really intrigued with the relationship that he has in Knoxville with Kelsey Pope and what Tennessee's offense provides. He was able to take a practice in the spring. They're early April. And I think if Tennessee wins out here next week, I think looking back, yeah, official visits were huge, relationships were huge. I think that practice in April is going to be something that really made a long-standing impression on Travis Smith when it comes to Tennessee. He saw a lot of guys with similar body types, similar ability to him running around out there on the practice field. Dante Thornton, Chris Brazel, those types of guys. And that's kind of the usage that Tennessee sold him. He saw those guys catch a lot of passes that day. And I think that's something that stuck in his mind a good bit. Both these schools recruiting him to the finish line. Alabama and Auburn are going to continue to be in the mix. And, Travis Smith's not saying a lot now that official visits are over. So I think we'll see a true announcement type deal with him, where maybe he doesn't necessarily tell a staff ahead of time, where this is all going to come down to is he wants to protect his moment.
Is this recruitment similar last year in Mike Matthews? Mike Matthews, also from the Atlanta area, was also being recruited by Georgia. Do you see any similarities here?
There are definitely some similarities here. I think when you look at it just overall, and I talked to Travis a few days before he made the trip to Knoxville for his official visit, and he talked at length to me about how he's kind of leaned on Mike Matthews throughout the process. He wanted to know, hey, when you got your Final Four down to what it was, Georgia was one of those, but it was Tennessee, Clemson, and USC hanging around in there. He's like, kind of what did you focus on that allowed you to leave the state? So they've had those conversations. Mike Matthews was Travis Smith's player host during his official visit. So it was that's been something that Tennessee's used to their benefit with Travis Smith. And kind of when you look at the state of Georgia, receivers have been leaving the state for the last little bit. So I think, that's one thing that Tennessee has laid on to Travis Smith as well. So, yeah, there's definitely some similarities in those two recruitments.
Yeah, just last month, C.J. Wiley, one that a lot of experts thought Georgia was going to land, ends up going to Florida State. So leaving the state of Georgia again for a top wide receiver. We'll have to see what happens. Let's stay in the state of Georgia and talk about a Georgia commitment. Linebacker Jordan Perlotti. Now, he had a great visit to Tennessee in June. There was a lot of talk coming out of that one about his interest in Tennessee, but this weekend we started seeing some picks come in on the recruiting prediction machine in favor of Tennessee. Now, what's going on? What's the timetable here that we could expect maybe something to happen with Jordan?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, this has been a recruitment for 18 months now, basically, that he's been committed to Georgia. And again, another situation, I talked to him and Travis Smith on the same day at the Corky Cal Classic at Georgia Tech. And I said, look, you're coming up to Tennessee. You're saying a lot of good things about him here. I said, but you've been to Auburn, you've been to Florida State, you've seen those programs. It felt like your recruitment has, had different momentum swings, but you've maintained that commitment to Georgia throughout. And I think for Jaden, ultimately, at the end of the day, this is, a opportunity for him as he went through June official visits to really analyze everything about all the programs that he was considering. I think Tennessee crushed his official visit. I think he saw everything that William Inge has been telling him since day one, since he got to Knoxville, and told him that he was his number one guy, that Tennessee was going to come after him, hard now that he was in the fold as the new linebackers coach. And I think all that started to add up for Jaden. He went back to Georgia, the following week. He wants to make a very informed decision in whatever he does. Coming out of that official visit in Knoxville, he was not sure that he was going to make the trip back to Georgia. He thought he might have seen enough to go ahead and just sit down with his family and decide what the best move for his future was. He ended up taking that trip to Georgia, and he's still working towards a decision. I think, Josh, we can see a final decision from Jaden Perlotti before the end of this month. That's something that he told me when I saw him before the official visits really ramped up there to Tennessee and Georgia. That's something that he maintained coming out of those official visits. He's very focused on being the guy on that Buford defense as they're trying to get back to another state championship.
All right, we'll see what happens there. I mean, Jordan Perlotti has been committed to Georgia, like you said, for over a year, so this would be a huge flip. But it sounds like there's some smoke there. Now we're going to talk about another linebacker, Christian Gass. He's out of Covington, Georgia, and again, mostly a UGA Tennessee battle. But Matt, this isn't a whoever gets Perlotti will be happy with Gass. I mean, both these programs want to take both these guys, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. And I think both of these guys, when you look at them, I think they fit what Tennessee and Georgia try to do to a T. They're versatile guys. They're super long, super athletic, high IQ guys that can play multiple roles inside of that defense. Christian Gass, Tennessee fell in love with Christian Gass in the spring, got him up to campus, measured him, had him in, felt like everything that he was, who he was as a person lined up with what they saw, as well as what they saw on film and his verified track times. He's a freakish type athlete, and that's the reason you see Georgia so heavily involved with him. Coming out of the month of June, Tennessee was in as good of a spot as it felt like they could be. Now, this is going to be a battle. He has announced his commitment date for July 20th, and this is going to be a battle to the finish line. This is a guy that both of these programs covet, and if either one of them get him, they're getting a freakish type athlete in the middle of the defense that can grow and play multiple roles as he continues to develop as a football player.
Yeah, you can tell that recruitment's heating up. Speaking of one recruitment that's not heating up because it's already red hot, that's David Sanders. Now, of course, UGA's involved here, but the way I see it, I think Ohio State, I think everybody right now kind of views this as 1A, 1B is Ohio State and Tennessee, whichever way you want to put those guys, and then you have Georgia in the 2 spot. How do you see it, and what are you hearing in terms of David Sanders making decisions? Do you think we hear something this month?
Josh, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a 1A, 1B situation right now. I think, depending on who you talk to, there's reason for Ohio State to feel good about David Sanders as the calendar flips over to July. And I think, depending on who you talk to, there's good reason for Tennessee to feel good about David Sanders as the calendar flips over to July. But now that official visits are over, I don't think it comes as much as of a shock, given the fact that David Sanders and his family took those spring visits. They took a bunch of official visits in the month of June. Things are kind of quiet there from their camp as they're processing information. They do so much on these visits. They take in so much information, and they break it down detail by detail. So I don't think that's much of a shock that things are very quiet there. It would not surprise me if David Sanders makes a decision sometime in July. He hinted probably toward the 1st of August, most likely. But I think when you look at the way David Sanders has attacked his process, I think it's very possible that we see him do something before the end of this month. And nothing definitive there. I do think he gets it out of the way before the season starts at Providence Day. But the thing about Dave Sanders is he is going to go through this recruitment at his pace. He's made that very clear. And I think once they get this information broke down and he sits down and says, hey, this is where it's at, I'm ready to go, we'll obviously see him make a decision. But it would not shock me if David Sanders does something for the 1st of July, just given the way that he's handled things.
Do you think that this recruitment, being that it's Tennessee versus Ohio State for the number 1 offensive tackle in America, does this take on a little bit more importance because of what happened last year with Jordan Seaton? Both Ohio State and Tennessee Like you said at the beginning of this, you could make a case for David Sand. I would feel good about Ohio State. I could tell you a bunch of reasons why I think he ends up there. I could tell you a bunch of reasons why I think right now he ends up at Tennessee. And I kind of felt that's the same situation we were in last year with Jordan Seaton. So is this David Sanders recruitment even more meaningful because they both missed out on Seaton last year?
I think that's a great question. I think when you look at it from the Tennessee side of things, and I can't speak to it from the Ohio State side of things, but if you're Tennessee and you land Jordan Seaton last year, you most likely don't swing so big at a Lance
Right.
Hurd who's going to start for you this fall. Now, ultimately, I still think it makes this recruitment that much more important if you're Tennessee, in a way that you've utilized the transfer portal to fill needs
Mm-hmm.
throughout your 3, 4 seasons here now in Rocky Top, but ultimately you haven't hit on that blue chip guy necessarily, that 5 star, you know, build your offensive line class around guy like a David Sanders. You swung big. You've been involved with those types of guys each year you've been there. But I think it still takes on some importance regardless of if you land a guy like Lance Hurd out of the transfer portal
Yeah,
because you missed Jordan Seaton. And I think for Ohio State, obviously you're looking at it kind of in the same way. You missed
I
on
think
your
so. Yeah.
guy. You managed to get him back up there to campus very late in that recruitment. As you said, you had a lot of good reason to feel like you were going to be able to land him. Both of those programs are going to want to build through the high school ranks, and there's just not many guys that come along like David Sanders year in and year out, and you've had him on your campus 4 times before a decision this year alone. So, I mean, I do think it's still massive regardless of the Jordan Seaton situation.
Yeah, and for the same exact reasons, I mean, I think he went to Ohio State 4 times. I think if an
Yeah.
Ohio State fan is listening to what you said, those same reasons why he's important and critical to Tennessee are the same exact reasons he's important and critical to Ohio State. So I'm just going to sit back and watch this one because last year with Jordan Seaton was crazy. I imagine David Sanders, as we get down to it, is going to be equally as crazy. But hey, I want to hear from you, Tennessee fans. What do we think about some of these UGA Tennessee battles? What do we think of David Sanders? Let me know. Comment section below.